Our next speaker is going to be someone who's flown in for the occasion, Nick Groombridge from Paul Weiss, who is the current president of the Federal Circuit Bar Association. I remember, we don't want to all start reminiscing here, I'm going to try to suppress that, but I remember in, I think it was 1999, being at a Federal Circuit Bar Association conference up in Squaw Creek, and Judge Whyte held a dinner where he solicited advice about the patent rules, and a lot of the current concepts in there got hashed out in those and other discussions. And that was just one example of his participation in the Federal Circuit Bar Association event. I'll let Nick amplify on that. But before I do that, I do want to say also the Federal Bar Association is also co-sponsoring. It's a fantastic group. There's a Northern District California chapter. It's very supportive of the court. And so I urge all of you to consider closely joining that organization and supporting it. There's nothing like new, fresh blood for all these organizations. But with that, let me bring Nick, who I really appreciate coming out for this.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. And I will be brief. I don't want to interrupt lunch. I guess I've already interrupted lunch, so I apologize. On behalf of the Federal Circuit Bar Association, like the others who have spoken before, I'm very flattered and grateful to be able to participate in this tribute to Judge Whyte, who has been unfailingly generous over the years with his time in contributing to FCBA events. And I'm not sure that there is very much that I can add to what has been said already, but as I was sitting here through the morning, after about the first half an hour, I felt compelled to just start writing down some of the adjectives and phrases that were being used about Judge Whyte, and I'd like to revisit a few of those. We heard repeatedly about his intellectual prowess. He has a searing intellect. He's an intellectual giant. He always displays intellectual curiosity. We heard words about him, who he is, and how he conducts himself, that he is gentle, kind and humble, that he offers deceptively simple insight, and that he is always generous of spirit. And we heard that at heart, Judge Whyte is a teacher. And I think that all of those are great descriptions of Judge Whyte, and I thought I would offer an anecdote which has nothing to do with the practice of law, and describes an event that took place a few years ago that I doubt that Judge Whyte remembers, but it made an impression on me. This was at a Federal Circuit Bar Association bench and bar conference at the Greenbrier sometime in the last decade. And Judge Whyte had very generously agreed to come and speak, and did, and shared great insights with the people at the conference. Now, it turns out that in the basement of the Greenbrier, there is a bowling alley, one of the many remarkable facts about that place. And in one of the evenings of the conference, I and a group of others found ourselves in the bowling alley, and at the next lane was Judge Whyte with a group of people also bowling. And I, as you can probably tell from my accent, I didn't grow up doing a lot of bowling. And as I stepped up and took my first shot at this, I promptly threw a gutter ball. And Judge Whyte, seeing this, made a point of coming over and explaining to me that that was very easily done, and that one shouldn't be discouraged. And in fact gave me a tip on how I might go about it better next time. And I thought that it displays the gentleness, the patience, the desire to teach, and the humanity with which we see in a truly great jurist. And so I would like to just finish by saying that I think it's completely true. Judge Whyte is a judge's judge. He's a trial lawyer's judge. And we, on behalf of the Federal Circuit Bar Association, certainly would like to thank him for his many, many contributions to patent law, and also, as a generalist judge, his many contributions to the law as a whole. So, Judge Whyte, thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Nick. Well, now we have the main event, Judge Whyte interview, and Judge Grewal, why don't you please ascend and carry on.
Good day once again. It's a pleasure to be up here with all of you, and of course with our man of the day, and for much longer than that, Judge Ron Whyte. We have a lot to cover in this conversation, and I am eager to explore important, weighty issues of patent law, technology law more generally, and jurisprudence. But I have to start off with just a few burning, non-jurisprudential, non-judgy questions that I have of my former colleague and dear friend. Judge Whyte, let's get right to it. Favorite flavor of ice cream?
Chocolate.
Favorite tennis player ever?
Rod Laver.
Favorite Northern District Magistrate judge? You don't have to answer that one. That's just fine.
Howard Lloyd.
Oh! Howard, I knew that one was coming, so we'll talk later about that. Well, Judge Whyte, many of us know your personal history, but many of us would like to learn more. And so I'd like to begin by talking a bit about your early life and learning more about your childhood and how you grew up. You were born in Pomona during the Second World War. We all think of you, when we think of you in your current role, as someone who studies patent specifications, who works arduously to get the perfect claim construction, who is constantly reading the latest and greatest cases from the Federal Circuit. Were you like this as a child?
I think the fiction is the same as a child as it is now.
Well, tell us all a bit about how you grew up. What was it like being a kid in Southern California in those days?
Well, my father was a judge. My uncle was a judge, so I came from a family that had some judicial background. So I guess I acquired my initial interest in becoming a lawyer and becoming a judge from my family, although the honest answer for going to law school was that I had learned by the time I was a senior at Wesleyan that mathematics was not my field, and that I had to figure out something else to do, and I didn't know what to do, so I went to law school. And then, fortunately, that developed into an interest, and was the start of my formation as a judge, I guess.
Well, I want to ask just a question or two about it, what it was like to grow up in a family of judges. In the White House, were family conversations centered on the law? Did your father and uncle talk about their work? Did you have a sense of what they did as a kid?
My dad talked about law all the time. My uncle, I didn't see that often, so he was I have a lot of respect for him, and he was a good guy, but he was a man of few words. And I can't really attribute any character trait or anything that I gained from him. I do remember one accomplishment, though, and that was that he was ill, and I sent him a get well card, and he was notorious for never responding to anything, and he actually responded to that.
What court did your father serve on?
Los Angeles Superior Court.
Now, when you were a kid, looking back, would you describe yourself as a serious kind of kid, or were you playful, or? something else altogether?
I'd say I was somewhere in between. I certainly wasn't too serious of a student. I didn't get into trouble, except sometimes my grades weren't what they were. My parents thought they should be, or the school I was at thought they should be. But I was pretty much a straight arrow. Kind of boring.
As a father of two children, I could use a little boring in my house, so I don't think you should disparage that too much. You mentioned your father. Was he a particular role model as you look back in terms of who you became and the kind of lawyer judge?
In some ways, yes. I think he had a personality that's similar to mine. I think he was conscientious, well-respected. So yeah, he was a role model in that sense.
Now, as a kid, you were an athlete, and you've been a lifelong sports fan, so I have to ask you just a few questions about each of those things. First, since you grew up in California at that time, I have to ask, do you remember when the Brooklyn Dodgers came out to California?
Yes.
And do you remember being excited about that? Did it have an impact on you as a sports fan at the
I
time?
really liked the Hollywood Stars, which was a minor league team, and I don't think baseball was ever as good as it was when Hollywood Stars were in Hollywood.
Well, many Giants fans would agree with you about that. When did you first become interested in tennis? When did you first pick up a racket?
That's a tough question. I would guess I was maybe 10 years old.
Do you remember who introduced you to the game? Was it a friend or a family member?
I think it was my mother in particular.
Was she a pretty decent athlete?
No.
Did you play other sports as a kid besides tennis?
I played basketball. Played basketball through my freshman year in college. And I went out for the team on my sophomore year, and the coach came over to me and said, "Ron, I haven't seen you play this year, but I saw you play last year. You're cut."
It's a pretty tough sentence. I do have to ask one other tennis-related question, which is, you mentioned Rod Laver as your favorite player of all time. Did you ever have a chance to watch him live?
Yes.
And did you pad in your game after Laver, or otherwise try to emulate?
Actually, went to a tennis camp once and hit with him.
Wow, you were on the court with Rod Laver. That's amazing. Well, you describe yourself as a student who sometimes struggled with focus. Not many students like that, at least in my experience, decide to major in mathematics when they go off to college. How did you come to decide to major in math?
I thought I was good in math till I got into advanced courses when they started drawing circles and with stars around the outside of it and saying that these lines are all parallel. I was having trouble.
Wait till we get to the questions about patent specifications. I want to come back to that in a moment. Well, as a kid who grew up in Southern California, especially at that time, were you thinking that you wanted to go back east for college? Was it your idea? Did a family member give you the idea? What kind of was your thought process at that time?
My father said if I wanted to do it, I could do it. My brother who is 3 years older than I went to Amherst College. And my father and I went back and visited him one spring vacation, and I decided I wanted to go, and he said he would send me, so I went.
Did you have fun in college? Would you describe your college experience as positive?
Yes.
Because I have to tell you, as someone who went to college in the 90s, college in the 60s looked a lot more fun. So I have to ask, was college fun for you?
Most of the time, I think very highly of Wesleyan, and I got to do a lot of activities. I was president of my fraternity, and I was on the, what was it called, the college, I can't remember the name of it. There's a board of 5 people, students that were in charge of sort of running the campus politics.
Yeah, the other image I have of academics at that time was that math in particular, but math and science more generally, was very, very well respected, and it was cool. It wasn't cool in the sense it is today, where cool means $1 billion app with, you know, huge dollars flowing in from all over the world, but cool in the sense that we were going to beat the Russians kind of cool. And I'm just curious, was math cool at that time? Was it something that, you know?
No, I don't.
You're killing me, Judge Whyte. I'm trying. All right, well, I wouldn't have been cool 30 years earlier is what you're saying, so that's fine. I can live with that. Well, what was it about math, I have to ask? What was it in math that appealed to you as a subject?
I thought problem solving was interesting and fun, and I thought I was pretty good at it. And when you get into the more advanced courses, it's all theory, and I could do the computations, but I didn't understand the theory.
Is it fair to say then, or was it the case that you decided to go to law school after you kind of had that realization about math, or was law always kind of lurking in the back of your mind?
It was definitely after my realization that I didn't have a future in math.
Now you eventually come back to Southern California to study law at USC. At any point, did you think about staying back east, or was California always home for you in your mind?
California was always home.
While you were at USC, was there a particular class or a particular professor you can remember that made an impression on you more than any other?
Henry Springmeyer. You walked into class, you had to be prepared to get on your feet and recite cases. And he was very much the Socratic method and old school, and he was really tough, but I enjoyed the class. I did well in it. And I just think he did a lot for me.
Was it tough as a math major coming to law school and being exposed to that kind of Socratic inquisition on day one?
I don't think so. In fact, I think at the time there was a study done at UCLA that showed that of all the college majors, the math majors did the best in law school.
Interesting. Well, did you know in law school what kind of lawyer you wanted to be, or what kind of law you wanted to practice?
No, I didn't. In fact, hearing some of the comments this morning, I sitting there saying, when I became a federal judge, I'm not sure I could have defined what a patent was or is, and so I certainly didn't anticipate getting involved in IP law when I was practicing.
Well, I do want to get to the IP law in a moment, but I have to ask before we leave Southern California and turn to your career here in the Bay Area. At some point in time and all that, you obviously met your wife, Ann. I'd like to just ask you if I could, how did the two of you meet?
She was on a date with a fraternity brother of mine.
Doesn't sound like things went terribly well for that fraternity brother.
Well, there's maybe a few tense moments.
Were you married shortly thereafter, or when were you married?
We were married after my, 1966, so...
50 years ago.
Yep.
50 years ago.
50th anniversary this year. After my second year in law school, right? Yeah.
Is he right about that? There we go. Well, I'm sure you recognize the ultimate Court of Appeals judge sits right over there.
You got that right.
You've always been very proud of your family, Judge Whyte, and I wanted to ask you about your kids and what they ended up doing with their lives.
Well, my son is a mathematics professor at the University of Illinois. He understands all this stuff. I don't even understand the title of his thesis or paper he wrote to get his doctor's degree. But he, I'm very proud of him, and I just am amazed that my son could be that good man.
Well, you know where they say the intelligence of children comes from, don't you? It's not from the father, so.
My wife was a math major also, so.
There you go.
And then my daughter teaches special education. She also has 2 children of her own, as does my son. But my daughter only works part-time now.
Well, we were talking a bit earlier about your coming back to Southern California. At some point after your service in the Navy, you decided that you wanted to practice law here in the Bay Area. What led you to starting your practice in San Jose?
Well, when I was in the service, my wife and I talked about where we would like to go because we didn't have any place that we were particularly tied to. So I interviewed in Albuquerque, Phoenix, San Diego, Santa Ana, and San Jose. And just the best opportunity for me seemed to be in the Bay Area, so that's what I chose. I eliminated Phoenix when we arrived there, and it was, I think, 96 degrees and humid. But of the other places, I just had the best opportunity in San Jose. It turned out to be a great place to come.
It sure did. You joined the Hoag Fenton firm, and you spend essentially your entire career in private practice with that firm. What was it like in the early days when you joined Hoag Fenton? What was the firm? How large was the firm? What kind of practice did you?
I think there were about maybe 15 people.
A mega firm by the standards of the day, right?
We tried cases, like we did a lot of civil rights or police misconduct cases from the defense side. And those cases were tried by one lawyer who would take a deposition and try the case. The increase in discovery and number of lawyers handling a case has really changed. I'm not sure to the better, but I like the good old days where one deposition and maybe a set of interrogatories was all you needed to try a case.
You know, my picture of practicing in those days, you had, as you point out, very little or no discovery before trial, a couple of martinis at lunch, ashtrays all around.
I didn't smoke or drink very much, but there certainly were a lot that did.
Well, you mentioned that you're...
You know that. You weren't born yet.
Let's just say I had a few lunches with Judge Howard Lloyd on occasion, and he filled me in. I want to ask you about your practice, Judge Whyte. You mentioned that you tried a lot of police cases, and in those days, was your practice a municipal practice exclusively, or did you have more of a general practice?
It was a general civil litigation firm. I did primarily work for public entities, trial work from a defense standpoint, basically for City of San Jose, County of Santa Clara, some school districts.
Were you largely in Superior Court? Did you ever have an occasion to appear in the Northern District in your practice?
I tried a case in front of Judge Ingram, and I think I had a couple in front of Judge Williams.
Wow. Well, at some point, you obviously got the idea in your head that maybe serving as a judge yourself might be something you might enjoy. When did it first click for you that maybe it was time to consider joining the bench?
I think it was about 3 or 4 years before I actually put in my application for state court. I think I decided that it would be a good fit for me, and I'd like to do something a little different than I'd been doing. So that's what led to my application.
You were eventually appointed by Governor Deukmejian. In those days, was there a tap on the shoulder? Was there a phone call in the middle of the night? What was it like when you finally got the word that you were going to serve on the Superior Court?
It was pretty exciting. I got a phone call. Another attorney for my firm also was appointed the same day. There were five judges appointed all at the same time, and we were pretty excited.
I bet. And were you able to join the court immediately, or was there some time period between when you got the call and when you actually stepped away from practice?
Well, I had to wind up some things, but it was relatively immediate.
So I want to just take you back for a moment to those first days at the Superior Court. You weren't there very long, as I think Judge Hamilton pointed out. What kinds of cases were you assigned? Were you put in a particular department at that time? What was the work like for you in that first year?
Basically handle the civil law and motion calendar because nobody else wanted to do it, and I did. But it was a tremendous amount of work. I had, when I started, maybe 25 motions a day.
Wow.
Which was interesting when I applied for or was interviewed for the federal judge position. I was asked to send 25 opinions that I'd written to the White House or to the Department of Justice, and to get 25 opinions meant I had to look for ones that went as short as one sentence, or I didn't send them any granted or denied opinions, but I might have said motion for summary judgment is granted, statute of limitations is run.
A model of judicial efficiency that many in this room might hope to emulate. Well, obviously, at some point, the White House started to look at you quite seriously. At that time, with that particular administration, what was the process like? Could you share some of that with us?
I got a phone call one day from the president of the local bar association judiciary committee, and he said they're looking for a federal judge in San Jose, and we've eliminated, reduced the number of people we think would be good to 25. You're on the list. Would you be interested? And I said, sure. And then thinking that was very flattering, and
You made the top 25, right?
and then I got a call later, and it had been reduced to, I think, 8 people. And then I got the word that I was going to be one of 3 recommendations. And I didn't expect it then, and then I did have an interview with then Senator Wilson's committee, and I was told it's going to be you or Judge Ware. If you get a call from me, this was a judge, I heard Senator Wilson's judiciary-looking guy. He had a better title than that, but He said, you get a call from me, you didn't get the job. If you get a call from Senator Wilson, you did. And I got the call from the looking guy. And Judge Ware was appointed, and then about a year later, I was walking in the hall of the Superior Court where I was sitting, and the court executive officer said to me, I hear we're going to lose you. And I said, what? She said, I hear you're going to federal court. I didn't even know there was an opening in federal court. And then nothing more came of it, and I got a call from Jim Ware, and he said, I hear you're coming to meet us or join us. And I said, oh. And then it was a little while before I heard anything, and I thought, they must have just be a figment of somebody's imagination or something. And it was getting towards the end of the year, and Wilson's term was expiring, and he was going to be governor of California. So I just sort of wrote it off, but my wife and I went out to dinner one night and came home, and there was a phone message from Senator Wilson saying, would you give me a call? So I called him, and I got the recommendation from Wilson, and then ultimately the nomination by the president.
So I have to ask, considering how things are today, about how long did it take you from the time you were nominated to the time you got confirmed?
It took a while because Judge Thomas had his bout with the Senate Judiciary Committee during the time that my application was pending.
Things were a little busy with the committee at that time.
Yeah, there was not a concern really of mine other than hoping that I would get the job, but I hadn't heard anything that caused me any alarm, but it took a long time to deal with Judge Thomas, as you all may remember.
Do you remember, Judge, were you just waiting for your vote on the floor at that time when the Anita Hill and Clarence Thomas hearings took place?
I had to go back to Washington for an interview at the Department of Justice, and it was interesting that process was something that concerned me a bit, but people like Jim Ware told me, don't worry about it, you get the senator's recommendation, you may hear stories about it being a problem, but it's not after that. And so that turned out to be the case, but I did have some rather interesting experiences in the process.
Well, eventually, those issues got resolved, and you were confirmed, and you took your seat on the Northern District. When you walked into the Northern District on that first day or in that first week, what was it like for you, having practiced in front of judges like Ingram and Judge Williams and Judge Peckham? What was it like for you to realize that these were now your colleagues?
Let me back up just a second. And when I eventually was invited back to the Department of Justice for an interview, I met the person in the Department of Justice who was in charge of judge recommendations and evaluating the candidates. And the first thing that he said to me was, "Oh, you're the white male from Northern California." And I didn't know how to answer that. I said, "That's true." But anyway, that was the question I got. And then I met with several people in the office, and then I went back to this guy who was in charge. And he said to me, what type of person do you think Senator Wilson is looking for? And I said, I think he's looking for non-political people, which certainly described me. I was totally not involved in politics. And the response was, that's too bad. And then he asked me to describe my judicial philosophy, which I think I did okay. But he said, we haven't been too big on some of Senator Wilson's recommendations. In fact, he recommended a judge in LA County who was handling law in motion, and she's had 16 reversals. And I'm sitting there thinking, I'm doing 25 motions a day. Discovery orders, which we were handling, are taken up by writs of mandate. I'm not so sure that my record would look too good.
25 was looking pretty good, right?
But then he said, well, send me 25 of your opinions. And I thought, well, maybe this is over. Jim had assured me it wasn't a problem. But then I eventually got a call about 11 or 12 at night. So it was in the East Coast. It was obviously 3 hours later. And it was some lady from the White House. She said, the president's going to call you tomorrow. Where are you going to be? And I said, I'm going to be at the doctor's office, or an eye check or something. And I said, but I can stay here if you want. And she said, no, you're at the doctor's office. We'll just call you there. And sure enough, he called. I was not at the doctor's office. I was at Superior Court.
Do you remember what President Bush said to you on that call?
I remember he concluded by saying over and out. So
Well,
anyway.
Well, I have to ask you about your early days at with the Northern District. When you walked in that first week or month, did you have a sense of the kinds of cases that 20-some years later you would be handling, the big patent cases, the large criminal matters, all the other cases that you're known for?
Not a thought as far as patent cases. I soon learned that, in fact, I think my first patent case that was coming up for trial was with Matt Powers and Don Martins, and they handed me lengthy briefs, and I looked at them and I said, I don't understand any of this stuff. So then I decided that I better do something, so I talked to Santa Clara Law School and asked if I could audit their patent law course, which I did.
Judge, I have to interrupt you there and just ask, did it ever occur to you as a sitting federal judge that a law school might be stunned to receive that kind of phone call?
I was just hoping they'd let me go.
And so did you audit the whole course?
Yep, I went to every class except for either one or two. I was very diligent.
I have no doubt about that. And with the class behind you and with your first few cases, were you hit immediately with a big slug of cases? I don't think everybody in the room understands it. In those days, San Jose did not enjoy the benefits of district-wide venue when it came to patent cases. So a lot of those cases were concentrated in that particular courthouse. Was that the case when you started as well, or did that come with time?
When I started, the cases were assigned by the interdistrict assignment rules, so they were not assigned district-wide. Saying this now it seems like nothing when you hear what Delaware has, but I know at one point I had 40 patent cases. Jim Ware, I think, had 35, and Judge Fogel, when he came, I think he had 25. The next highest judge in the district was something like 4. So it was a significant change when we went to a district-wide assignment system.
Now, if we put the timing together right, if I've got the math right, you were given this docket of patent cases and trying these cases 3, maybe 4 years before Markman came out. I have to ask you, for some of us, that is history, and important history. When you were trying those first patent cases before you had the guidance from the Supreme Court about how to construe patent claims and when and whether to construe patent claims, how are you instructing juries in those kinds of cases? Were they just basically given the entire case, or do you remember how you thought about the problem?
They were basically given the entire case. They decided how the claim should be construed.
And do you remember in those days whether you were even thinking about things that we now take for granted in patent cases, like time limits or limits on the number of claim terms or prior art references, things like that?
I don't remember being too concerned about, what was it? I think we really focused on infringement. But that soon changed with Cybor and Markman and so forth.
I have to ask you about Cybor, since you played some role in that case. Would you like to tell our audience a bit about your work in that case?
I was the district judge in Cybor, but I have to say, because you'd think, since the issue in the case was what's the scope of review of the district judge's instruction, or how's it to be reviewed, that the court held that it would be de novo review, that I would have been reversed, but I wasn't. I was affirmed. But that was certainly a major change when that case came about. In fact, if you think about the history of claim construction, it's kind of amazing. We went from give it all to the jury to de novo review, and we had a short time where dictionary definitions seemed to carry the day. Then finally we came out with Phillips, which I think is a pretty good decision as far as what you look at in claim construction. But it was still de novo review, and then when we had the Teva case finally, or Teva, which gives some deference to trial judges' factual findings.
We've talked at some length already today about your important role in crafting local patent rules that have become really the standard for the country. It's not often we get to talk with a framer about his original intent. Can I ask you, where did the idea come from? What were you thinking about? Who were you talking about these issues with when you decided that we needed these rules?
Say I is gross exaggeration. There were some attorneys involved along with me. Just the case management conferences in patent cases were such a nightmare. People would come in and be very contentious. There was some thought from the bar that the judges were inconsistent. When one judge would do it one way, another judge would do it another way. So we thought some scheduling rules and disclosure rules that could be agreed upon would be very helpful. And that's sort of what caused the origination of the rules. And it worked really well. I mean, now in most initial case management conferences, at least I think we've experienced in our district, often they'll come in with stipulated schedules and disclosures, and it's really made the practice a lot better.
Did you have any sense that those rules were going to become the standard for the country?
No, I really didn't. I think the Northern District is pretty proud of the fact that we have had sort of a leadership role in that area.
I have to ask, when you were discussing the rules locally with the judges on your own court. Was it a tough sell at first? Were there some holdouts among the judges? Or?
I don't recall any tough sell. I think everybody thought it was a good idea.
They were all just happy to have you do all that work. I suspect. What Judge, as we've talked about, you've seen so many different kinds of patent cases across essentially the entire history of the modern patent case and modern patent trial. It's been observed that patent lawyers and litigators can be particularly difficult. I have to first ask you, is that your experience as compared to other areas of law? And if so, why do you think that's so? You've seen almost everyone in the country at some point in your career who practices in this area. Why do you think patent lawyers have that reputation? And is it deserved?
Well, there is so much money involved in so many of these cases that I think people are afraid not to do everything possible to prepare their case. I think I've often suggested that patent lawyers should take a vacation 30 days before trial, because those last 30 days, there's always, well, they're just producing these documents that they should have produced long ago, and this has been misrepresented, and it's just a miserable time. At least that's been my experience. On the other hand, the actual trial of patent cases generally is extremely well done. There can be cases where there are lots of disputes, but most of the heavy disputes have been dealt with, and a good patent trial is a real joy.
You've seen so many different kinds of cases, patent and non-patent, with so many lawyers over the years, Judge Whyte. And yet, when I sent out a word to some of my former colleagues and now current colleagues back in practice, asking them for even one example of where you lost your temper in a case, I couldn't get anybody to fess up and actually step forward. How have you been able to maintain your even keel and your temperament in all of these difficult, hard cases with lawyers going at it and going at you? What's the secret for the rest of us?
I don't know if there's any secret. I think a lot depends on the tone you set in your courtroom. You set a tone that tells the people either directly or indirectly that they're expected to behave rationally and not get emotional and not call the other side names. I think it just happens.
Now, I happen to know, at least in one non-patent case, you have been known to raise your voice slightly when one lawyer or one party was acting out of school. And I will tell you from around the courthouse that in that one instance, everyone knew something really, really big had happened because Judge Whyte never did that. Judge, I wanted...
You're going to tell me what case it was?
At dinner. I do want to ask you about your law clerks, who I know have meant so much to you over the years. You've had dozens and dozens of law clerks go on to impressive legal careers of their own after serving you and serving the Northern District. What does that kind of record mean to you personally?
It means a lot. I think the number one pleasure of serving as a judge is working with the law clerks. We are so lucky that we get to pick from the very best and work with them. And, you know, listening this morning when they were talking about cases I'd handled, and some more important than others perhaps, but I'm sitting there thinking, well, Mike wrote this case, or Roman wrote this case, or Francis did this. I think one of the skills of a district judge is to hopefully manage and direct his law clerks, or her law clerks. And that's the real way you get out decent opinions, is that you depend a great deal on people that are a lot smarter than you are, and all they need is a little direction.
Well, Judge, as far as judicial legacies go, it's hard for me to imagine a better one than that, so I think we're going to leave it there. I want to thank you for this opportunity to share a little bit of your personal history with this audience, who obviously feels so close to you and to your legacy with this court. I also want to thank you personally for the opportunity to serve as your colleague on the fourth floor of the San Jose Courthouse. Thank you so much, Judge. Thank you again, Judge Whyte. We are going to roll to the next panel, but before we do that, we actually have a very short tribute to Judge Whyte from some very important people, not just to him, but to the intellectual property community. We're going to first hear from Judge Jeremy Fogel, our colleague here in the Northern District, and of course the current director of the Federal Judicial Center. We'll then hear from Michelle Lee, the current present director of the United States Patent and Trademark Office. And then we'll hear also, on behalf of all of Judge Whyte's law clerks, from Diane Doolittle, partner at Quinn Emanuel. And with that, let's turn to the tribute.
Greetings to everyone. I'm so sorry that I can't be with you at this wonderful event honoring my colleague and dear friend, Ron Whyte. It's impossible to describe adequately the difference that Ron has made in the way patent cases are handled in our federal courts. Anyone who wonders whether a district judge can have consequential national impact need look no further than Ron Whyte. Both by his personal example as a trial judge and by his dedication to the development of local patent rules and best practices, he has changed the way judges manage and think about patent litigation, and he has changed the way patent lawyers litigate. Ron's personal qualities, his integrity, his work ethic, and his deep kindness are every bit as impressive as his judicial work. We have known each other for almost 30 years, beginning when we were judges of the Santa Clara Superior Court in the 1980s. Our district court chambers in San Jose were a floor apart, and Ron always was the first person I sought out when I was struggling with a legal question, an ethical issue, or anything else that might benefit from his unfailingly thoughtful judgment. Ron, we will miss you more than we can say. Thank you for your remarkable public service and for the professional and personal legacy that you are leaving.
Oh, he's such a legend and a luminary in the field of patent law. His influence over the past 20 plus years has been tremendous, from the local patent rules to his handling of so many critical, important, not just patent cases, but high technology cases. So many contributions, but if I had to choose one, I would say it's his contributions to the local patent rules of the Northern District of California. Those local patent rules, now that I sit where I sit, and I've had the privilege of having a national purview of the management of patent cases and patent litigation across the country, those local patent rules served as a model for so many district courts across the country. Oh, he taught simply by example. He was always gracious. He was always prepared. He treated every side of the dispute equally. So just by virtue of his example, he taught civility in the courtroom.
I'm here to share the perspective of a former clerk who's had the privilege of observing Judge Whyte both on and off the bench for the last 25 years. Judge Whyte is a great jurist. He's also a great man. Superlatives come very easy when talking about the judge. In fact, at a recent reunion of Clerks, we discussed the various qualities of Judge Whyte, and person after person shared the same thoughts, and that is that Judge Whyte is wise. He is patient. He is respectful. He is diligent. He is incredibly intelligent, really brilliant, and he's deeply committed to serving the community at administering justice fairly. I've come up with a couple of anecdotes to sort of breathe life into these well-deserved compliments of Judge Whyte. The first demonstrates his qualities of diligence and intelligence. When Judge Whyte joined the federal bench back in 1992, he knew very little about patent law, but he appreciated that and really foresaw that the patent docket would explode. And he appreciated that high-stakes intellectual property disputes would be important to resolve fairly and efficiently. And so he set out to become an expert. The only days that he would leave work early were to head off to a patent law class that he would audit at Santa Clara Law School, taught by none other than Ronald. And very quickly, the student became the master. The second anecdote I want to share with you really demonstrates the qualities of wisdom, patience, and public service. When Judge Whyte's new clerks would come to chambers, he would give them a sort of orientation, and it would start like this. We serve the public. We will treat everyone with respect and dignity, and in particular for the lawyers who appear before me, who come well prepared and who have worked hard, we too will do the same for them. Be prepared and work hard on their cases. And so everyone who appeared before Judge Whyte, from the most talented, iconic trial lawyer to Propre litigants, would receive the same welcome and be treated with the same respect and dignity. One time, Judge Whyte was tested a little bit when a Propre plaintiff appeared in his courtroom, and when Judge Whyte directed him to state your appearance, the plaintiff got a little flustered and apparently confused, because after a few moments, he blurted out somewhat sheepishly that he was appearing in a long-sleeve shirt, jeans, and tennis shoes. And while the rest of the courtroom was busting up in laughter, Judge Whyte kept a straight face and kept the appropriate decorum, because he didn't want to embarrass anyone who appeared in front of him, and he proceeded as if nothing had happened at all. You know, we're all familiar with Judge Whyte's important decisions in the area of intellectual property. We're familiar with his leadership in developing this district into a patent law powerhouse venue. But really, the rest of his legacy emanates from the qualities I've been talking about. Over the many years that he's been on the bench, literally thousands of litigants have received justice in his courtroom and been treated with respect and dignity. And for those of us who've had the opportunity to work with and get to know Judge Whyte, including the small army of clerks now who have had that privilege, we've been inspired by what we have seen. He has modeled, really, as a judge over the last 25 years. So for a judge who has such modesty and is so self-effacing, it's important for him to know that his influence runs very wide and very